Olá, bom dia a todos. Eu sou Eliane Dornelas, responsável, e coordeno o Departamento Técnico de Ciências da Vida da Color Mix Especialidades. Quero dar as boas-vindas a todos que estão aqui e agradecer pela presença de vocês nesta webinar da Color Mix Especialidades. A Color Mix, realiza esse evento em parceria com a Associação Brasileira de Cosmetologia. Lembrando, que essa plataforma de webinar da ABC faz parte de um pacote aí de serviços que a ABC presta aos seus associados. Este evento está sendo também transmitido pelo canal do YouTube da ABC. Então, caso você não consiga assisti-lo na íntegra, o vídeo ficará disponível no canal Cosmetalk da ABC. Aproveite essa oportunidade para se inscrever no canal e marque, para poder receber as notificações dos novos vídeos, enfim. Este evento está sendo transmitido globalmente, tem tradução do inglês para o português, para quem estiver aqui na nossa plataforma do Zoom. Para poder acessá-lo, na barra, vai só clicar o botão Interpretation e escolher o idioma que você deseja acompanhar a transmissão. As perguntas e dúvidas a gente vai deixar para o final, então você pode, à medida da apresentação, ir anotando os seus questionamentos, e depois a gente vai ter no final, você pode deixá-la pelo chat ou pelo Q&A. Ok? O assunto de hoje, que vamos tratar é bastante relevante para o mercado de cosmético brasileiro, que são os desodorantes e antiperspirantes. E a gente traz uma opção natural, sustentável, lá com o pessoal da Calichem, da Itália, e quem vai estar conosco aqui, e eu convido para entrar com a gente, é o Dr. Guglielmo Bifuco. Seja bem-vindo, Dr. Guglielmo.
Hello, Eliane. Hello, Brazil. Nice to see you again. So, Eliane, if I can start the presentation. Perfect. So, just a moment that I put my screen. I put my screen in sharing mode. Opla. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this webinar. The topic that we will go through today is the description of an ingredient for deodorant application. The ingredient is called DEOHAP Dry. And this is a raw material, is a patented raw material of which we will see all the details. It's a material in mineral form that is specific for the sweat and odor control through a very innovative and unique mechanism of action. Before starting the introduction of the raw material in object, I will just mention the main areas of technology where Calicem's activity is involved. Basically, Calicem is an Italian company operating in a personal care field since approximately 20 years. Our activity in terms of development and production of raw materials started with the development of lipoprotein and lipoamino acids derived from olive oil. Basically, Calicem has a family of patented emulsifiers and surfactants based on the olive oil technology. Then, throughout the years, the developing activity of Calicem expanded. As a matter of fact, we have implemented in our production the development of ingredients coming from molecular biology and biotechnologies. Namely, we have, for instance, active ingredients based on DNA, the use of deoxyribonucleic acid in pure form from biological sources, and products coming from biofermentation. And last but not least, and that will be the topic of today, we have a family of ingredients based on the use of functionalized hydroxyapatites based basically on biomimétic materials. So the hydroxyapatite that we will see today for the deodorant application is basically a biomimétic material, but we will see the details of this category of ingredients right now. So, as mentioned, the product we are describing today is called the DEOHAP Dry. DEOHAP Dry is an absolute innovation in personal care field because this is a product that is patented for deodorant application. And in such a case, the patent relies on the use of hydroxyapatite functionalized with oligoelements, so with ions, such as, for instance, zinc and magnesium. This ingredient is internationally patented, and it is a product that has a functional target which is quite challenging, because basically what we are offering in the market is an ingredient that should replace antiperspirant actives. We will see during the presentation the differences between this product and the most popular antiperspirants found on the market, namely aluminum-based substances. And what we will see is that DEOHAP Dry, despite having a totally different nature and mechanism of action, is able to stand performances some way comparable to the performances of antiperspirants. At the end of the day, what we will see will be an activity of this specialty that will guarantee a long-lasting sweat and odor control that was evaluated until 48 hours after the first application, and an ingredient with a microbiota-friendly nature. Of course, the market in this moment is trying to move away from aluminum salts derivatives. And the good news is that definitely this raw material does not contain aluminum salts in its composition. So before analyzing the, let's say, the characteristics of DEOHAP Dry, we will make a refresh of the main concepts linked to the physiology of the sweat and how the active ingredients found on the market work. Basically, what we know regarding sweat. Sweat basically is an odorless liquid which is produced by sweat glands. We know that the sweat at a certain point does not have the best odor in the world. And the reason for that is because the sweat that is produced by the sweat glands in the human body at a certain point is metabolized by skin bacteria. So the odor of the sweat is not, let's say, an intrinsic characteristic, but it comes out after the metabolism, after that the bacteria metabolize the sweat components. So basically, this is the physiology of sweat and the formation of odors. In detail here, we can see some images that explain probably more clearly the formation, the genesis of the unpleasant odors. So we can see on the left side of the screen that in the axillary area, there is a population of bacteria, which represents, for instance, the local microbiota of the armpit. And we know that throughout the day, through the sweat glands, a certain amount of sweat, indeed water, is produced. So basically, the interaction that will take place between the skin bacteria and the sweat components will lead to the formation of the sweat odors, the typical malodorous the typical malodorous gases that the deodorants and antiperspirants are aimed to fight against. So, what is the traditional approach of personal care and antiperspirant market? Basically, the traditional approach regards the use of ingredients like, for example, aluminum chloride and aluminum chloride rates. These specific substances, in fact, are able to basically form a sort of plug that settles on the sweat glands, avoiding the physiological perspiration. This strategy is for sure highly efficient and shows high efficacy. The problem is that in order to accomplish this goal, what we are sacrificing is the regular perspiration of the skin. So as a result of these let's say, aggressive activity of aluminum salts, what will happen is that we will have frequently skin irritation, impair of skin microbiota, and this will take place not only because of the presence of chloride on the skin, but also because of the physiological change of the pH that will take place inside the armpit, because basically these ingredients with the aluminum derivatives have a very acidic pH. So the extremely acidic pH on the of this deodorant, of this let's say finished product, are able to affect the local microbiota, promoting some consistent damages. So in general, what we can say is that aluminum salts are substances that are able to inhibit the regular perspiration of the skin through a plugging action that basically obstructs the sweat duct. Of course, if this mechanism is prolonged, so I mean, if our skin is exposed for a lot of time to the activity of these substances, we are facing a concrete risk of an irreversible obstruction of the sweat glands. So, I mean, the market is very well aware of this risk, and in fact, one of the most popular trends today in personal care industry is trying to find some alternatives to the use of these antiperspirant substances. So, here we are to the DEOHAP Dry. So this is the patented molecule that is included inside the raw material. So as anticipated at the very beginning, this DEOHAP Dry specialty contains biomimétic hydroxyapatite. The biomimétic hydroxyapatite is a mineral with a biomimetic nature. When I say biomimetic, I mean that this mineral is physiologically occurring in the human body. For example, we can find it in the tooth, in the bones. So what Calichem did is setting a method, a production method with which we are able to obtain from a synthetic process this biomimetic substance, which has exactly the same behavior from a physical and chemical point of view as the physiological hydroxyapatite. So this mineral has very interesting characteristics. It is, as a matter of fact, one of the most important products where Calichem focuses its developing activity. We have hydroxyapatite versions, for example, in sun care, in oral care, and indeed in deodorants. So in the case of deodorants, the most relevant characteristic of the biomimetic hydroxyapatite is its functionalization with divalent cations, namely magnesium and zinc, whose addition in the hydroxyapatite network enables to obtain very interesting characteristics, which we will see immediately. So here we have an overview of the main mechanisms of action and the main functional characteristics of the biomimetic hydroxyapatite. We see 4 main points. We will go through each of them to explain how this raw material is able to carry out 2 main activities. The first one is the adsorption of the sweat fluids, which comes from a high compatibility of the hydroxyapatite mineral with the fluids of sweat. And last but not least, we will see the interaction that the hydroxyapatite is able to establish with malodorous gases through its electrophilic character. In any case, we will see everything in detail. So here we have a picture of hydroxyapatite, because nothing speaks better than pictures. Basically, here we can see how the biomimetic hydroxyapatite mineral looks when we watch it at the SEM microscope. So basically what we can see is that the surface of this mineral shows an extremely porous and large superficial area. So this highly porous substance is the main reason for which the hydroxyapatite has a high complementary is highly complementary with the sweat fluids. And in detail, this porous structure will make sure that some specific hydrophilic groups found in the hydroxyapatite molecules will be able to interact with the water found on the sweat. Dihydroxyapatite, in fact, is a mineral that contains mainly calcium, phosphate, and hydroxyl ions. So the hydroxyl ions of the hydroxyapatite are exposed on the porous surface of the hydroxyapatite. So these hydroxyl ions exposed to the surface of hydroxyapatite will be able to form hydrogen bonds with the molecules of water that will be found in the sweat. So basically, through a simple chemical reaction, an hydrogen bond created by hydroxyapatite hydroxyls and the water molecules found on the sweat, the DEOHAP will be able to subtract the water from the skin. So basically, it will be a mechanism of water adsorption. Now, since the structure of hydroxyapatite is so much porous, and we can see some images here, so all the pores found on the hydroxyapatite surface will be able to draw several molecules of water. So the saturation level of the surface of hydroxyapatite will be very high. So basically, hydroxyapatite, through its large superficial area and through its pores, will be able to draw a huge quantity of water molecules from the sweat. This will result in a sweat control activity. Particularly interesting is also another mechanism. So here, as you can see, we are playing with chemistry, with inorganic chemistry. So here, basically, what we are going to explain is the mechanism with which the biomimétic hydroxyapatite is able to subtract the malodorous substances from the sweat. So right before, we have observed the mechanisms of action with which hydroxyapatite is able to subtract water from the sweat, so the fluids from the sweat. In this case, instead, we will see the interaction between hydroxyapatite and the malodorous substances found on the sweat. So basically, in this case, the activity of subtracting the malodorous gases will no longer be ascribable to the hydroxyl ions as it happened before, but in this case, the most relevant player working is represented by the zinc. In fact, as anticipated, DEOHAP dry is a biomimetic mineral functionalized with zinc. So the zinc, when included inside the hydroxyapatite network, it will create a sort of status of its orbitals, which will make it as a moderate Lewis acid, able to interact with high affinity with Lewis bases like the malodorous gases that will be found on the sweat. So we will see this mechanism more in detail here. So basically, you can see that the hydroxyapatite molecule on the left side of the screen contains these yellow particles, which are represented by the zinc. Basically, the zinc included in the hydroxyapatite network will have an empty orbital, which will be created indeed by the hydroxyapatite mineral system. So this empty orbital of zinc represents our Lewis acid. So this Lewis acid will show from a chemical point of view an electrophilic nature, which will interact with the nucleophilic nature of the electrons found in malodorous gases. In this case, for instance, we are observing the disulfide the ammonia and the sulfidric substances that are able to interact with the zinc orbital. So basically, DEOHAP dry works with a dualistic mechanism of action because the hydroxyls found in its mineral nature are able to interact with the water, while the zinc will be able to interact with malodorous substances based on disulfide and ammonia. So basically, it will be hydrogen bonds and a Lewis acid-base reaction. So these are the chemical principles with which DEOHAP Dry shows its absorbing action on sweat fluids and sweat malodorous substances. So here, a very simple image. So we can see this, this structure of the hydroxyapatite, which will be applied on the skin, will form a sort of invisible mineral layer that will be able to subtract both malodorous substances and sweat fluids. So in comparison to the traditional aluminum salts, we have a consistent difference in the mechanism of action, because as a matter of fact, we are not plugging the sweat glands, avoiding the physiological perspiration. The physiological perspiration with DEOHAP will normally take place. The point is that after that, the sweat will be produced, DEOHAP Dry will steal it from the skin. So basically, there is no aggressiveness in this mechanism of action. Now, we have observed all the theory. Let's move to the scientific objectification of the activity of DEOHAP. In this case, Calicam has made very thorough studies to demonstrate both the mechanisms of action that were explained before through in vitro analysis, and also we have made in vivo tests to assess the functional characteristics of DEOHAP Dry and how it performs in functional terms when compared, for example, to antiperspirant standards. So here we can see the in vitro adsorption test. Basically, in this case, we have let's say the evaluation of the adsorbing activity of DEOHAP Dry on several substances like urea, lactates, and ammonia. Why have we chosen these specific substances? Basically, these substances are the substrates on which the bacteria are acting to promote the formation of malodorous substances. And in order to evaluate the potential of the DEOHAP activity, what we have done is making a comparison against other molecules found on the market with a very well-known adsorbing action. In this case, the parameters of functionality were compared, for instance, with zeolite, with talc, and with a combination of magnesium salts, namely magnesium hydroxide and magnesium carbonate hydroxide. Basically, with this specific test, we are assessing the capability of DEOHAP Dry to adsorb the ammonia, and the results speak by themselves. So what we can observe is a better adsorbing performance of the DEOHAP Dry in comparison to any other benchmark that was taken under consideration in this study. Only zeolite gets partially close to the activity of DEOHAP Dry. So basically what we can observe is that in comparison to all the benchmarks analyzed, DEOHAP Dry shows a higher adsorbing action on ammonia. And basically, here we go back to the previous explanation. This activity is related to the nature of Lewis acid that the zinc takes when included in the hydroxyapatite system. A similar test was made also on the evaluation of lactates and urea. So in this case, the model of test is very similar. It is important to also to contextualize this specific test. This test was is a model of test that was introduced by a very popular university in Italy, which has a very high expertise in the study and evaluation of adsorbing materials. It's the University of Milan. So before we have seen the test where we were describing the activity on ammonia. Here we are seeing the efficacy of absorbing substances on lactate and urea. So we still have some very popular benchmarks in the market, in this case, zeolite and magnesium ions, and the results basically don't change. So we can see again that the hydroxyapatite, the functionalized hydroxyapatite, stands performances consistently superior to those of the benchmarks. So in this case, we can see an activity 100% more effective compared to the zeolite, while the comparison doesn't even start, for example, against magnesium salts. And the trend that we can observe on the activity on lactates is definitely the same that we can observe, for example, with urea. So these specific in vitro tests help understanding the mechanism of action of DEOHAP dry, which is basically a raw material able not only to draw water from the sweat fluids, but also and above all subtracting malodorous substrates, malodorous substances that are the substrates of bacteria. So again, we repeat the concept. So in this case, we are observing the activity of a material which is significantly different in comparison to the activity of antiperspirants, because at the end of the day, what we are doing is not avoiding the physiological perspiration, but basically we are allowing the skin to breathe and release its substances through the sweat. And at that point, the DEOHAP will start working through a drying and deodorizing action. So we have seen so far the in vitro tests that help understanding the adsorbing mechanism of hydroxyapatite and how its adsorbing potential stands in comparison to market benchmarks. At this point, let's go deeper and let's analyze the activity observed in vivo. So this is the most important test that is carried out in personal care industry to determine the activity of deodorants and antiperspirants. It is namely a gravimetric test. So this test is a test that, for example, is taken under consideration by the American Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, which defines as antiperspirant substances that are able to reduce the wetness in the armpit area of at least 20% in at least 50% of the target population that is subject to the activity of the substance. So summarizing and recapping this concept, in order to be defined as antiperspirant according to the FDA, it is necessary to reduce at least 20% of the sweat in at least 50% of the target population. And here we can observe the results of DEOHAP dry. So it's quite astonishing to observe that DEOHAP dry exceeds the threshold imposed for the, let's say, the definition of antiperspirant molecule, because in order to be declared as an antiperspirant, we need at least minus 20% of sweat absorption. You can see that after 24 hours, the amount of sweat reduction corresponds to minus 36%. Whereas after 48 hours, the sweat reduction has a value of 31%. So this test is extremely important because it enables to understand and to stand the claim that a finished product containing DEOHAP dry works in compliance with the parameters required to be defined as antiperspirant, although it is not an antiperspirant. So this is the key concept to keep in mind, because at the end of the day, an antiperspirant plugs and avoids the skin perspiration. So in our case, we are able to keep the same performances of an antiperspirant, but with a non-antiperspirant mechanism. So this is why we defined DEOHAP Dry as a gentle active ingredient, because basically it is not, it does not show a plugging and a, let's say, an obstruction on the sweat glands level. And what's interesting is that this activity is prolonged over time. In fact, we have observed activity not only after 24 hours, but also after 48 hours. In addition to the previous points, so we have observed the in vitro efficacy of the DEOHAP Dry as absorbing substance for the sweat fluids and for the sweat malodorous substances. And also we have observed the in vivo activity in sweat reduction. Here we can see some additional mechanisms of action of DEOHAP Dry, namely the reduction of sebum, which takes place, for example, with a reduction of minus 18% of the sebum production on the skin, and also a bacteriostatic activity exerted on several species, bacterial species. So here in this case, we can see both physiological and let's say more pathological germs, namely Staphylococcus epidermis, Staphylococcus aureus, Escherichia coli, and Pseudomonas aeruginosa. So basically what's interesting is to highlight that this raw material is not a bactericidal active, but a bacteriostatic substance. So this is important because basically DEOHAP Dry will not affect the local microbiota in the armpit area, which is one of the most, let's say, appreciated claims that today we can make with deodorants, for instance. So basically here we are repeating the concept. So the bacteriostatic action of DEOHAP Dry is the reason for which basically we cannot claim a killing action on the skin bacteria, but I mean a respectful action on the skin microbiota of the armpit. So we have observed all the most relevant points of DEOHAP Dry. So now we will make, again, a recap of the most relevant functional features. So we have seen that in the market, we have a problem today with the deodorants, and namely with substances containing antiperspirants based on aluminum salts, which are known to promote a deep obstruction and potentially an irreversible damage to the sweat glands. DEOHAP Dry, through its unique mechanism of action, which is finalized to reduce sweat fluids and sweat malodorous substances, is basically able to exert an activity, a deodorizing and sweat control activity without affecting the regular perspiration. And as we have seen through gravimetric tests, which are modeled on the, let's say, on the standards of the FDA, DEOHAP Dry works like an antiperspirant, complying to the functional requirements of an antiperspirant, although it is not an antiperspirant molecule. Other points, other key advantages that we have seen is that DEOHAP Dry does not affect the local microbiota of the armpit, because basically it does not have a bactericidal action, but a bacteriostatic activity. And also for another reason, we know that, for instance, aluminum derivatives require extremely acidic pH in their formulations. So usually, for example, aluminum salts require a pH in the formula of approximately 4.5, more or less. When using DEOHAP Dry, we have no pH limitations. So we can either work at acidic formulations, but we can definitely work with neutral pH So basically, we know that the physiological pH in the armpit area is approximately has a value of approximately 6. So that is definitely a value of pH which falls in the comfort zone of DEOHAP Dry when it comes indeed to put it into cosmetics formulations. Regarding the sustainability of DEOHAP Dry, there are different points to consider. First of all, the fact that we are using an ingredient which is sustainable for the human health. This is a very important point. And starting from the initial definition of the material contained in DEOHAP Dry, which is the biomimétic hydroxyapatite. It's the concept of biomimetic, which meets very well the concept of sustainability, of the health sustainability. And of course, the sustainability topic also regards the production process. DEOHAP Dry is in fact produced according to a unique and exclusive method of production, which complies with the parameters of the EcoScale, which is a semi-quantitative tool to assess the level of sustainability of a cosmetics preparation. And in terms of production score, the DEOHAP Dry production reports a score superior to 90%. So also from a production point of view, this product meets the sustainability requirements imposed today by the cosmetics market. Last but not least, we have also a very important acknowledgement obtained internationally. In fact, DEOHAP Dry was awarded at the 25th IFSCC conference with a poster for its innovative approach in the deodorant field. So here you can see the details of the paper and the poster that was submitted and approved. So here we have a summary of all the potential claims that we can take advantage of by using DEOHAP Dry. You can see that the messages are really heterogeneous. We can claim basically a 24-48 hours protection, sweat control, odor control, gentle activity, the absence of aluminum salts in the composition of the raw material and in the finished product, of course, the respectful action on the skin microbiota, and much more, as you can see. Regarding a formulation standpoint, we have the following applications for which DEOHAP Dry can be used. So DEOHAP Dry is a raw material that has been initially developed in suspension form, which is specific, for example, for emulsions. So mainly for roll-on applications and also for sprays that are not containing alcohol. It can be used definitely in sprayable applications as well, not in aerosol when it comes in suspension form. Lately, we have also introduced on the market a powder version, which is instead specific for anhydrous formulation, namely sticks. So today, summarizing the concept, DEOHAP Dry is a version that is available both for roll-on emulsion application and also for sticks. Here you can see, for instance, an example of a roll-on deodorant. This is an hyperfluid emulsion containing DEOHAP Dry used at a concentration of 20%. So in this case, we are focusing on a raw material which is in suspension form. So basically, DEOHAP Dry is a raw material that in suspension form is concentrated at 30%. So basically, when we are using 20% of raw material, we are having more or less 7% of active matter. So this is the formula that was tested with the gravimetric test that were previously shown. So in order to comply with the functional, let's say, requirement of an antiperspirant, we need to use 7% of active matter of DEOHAP Dry. If we are using the suspension, indeed, we will need 20% of it. So this is the roll-on deodorant formulation. As anticipated, recently we have introduced on the market also a powdery version, which is more specific for water-free formulations. So this is a DEO paste. You can see how the product looks on the right side of the slide, where there is a picture of the end product. So this is an anhydrous deodorant paste formulation with sweat control, antimicrobial, oil absorption, and deodorizing features, where basically we have a final dry touch, dry feel, and a non-sticky afterfeel. So this formulation, as you can see, is a more complex formulation because it contains also other active ingredients that synergize with DEOHAP Dry. So for this reason, you can see that the quantity, the amount of use of DEOHAP Dry is lower than what we have seen before, simply because in this case, DEOHAP Dry is not working alone, but in synergy with the synergistic effect with other active ingredients. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and we will have a Q&A session now where I will reply to any potential doubt that has arisen. Thank you for your attention meanwhile.
Bem, Guglielmo, tem bastante questões feitas em inglês aqui no chat. E no Q&A, se você quiser responder diretamente, fique à vontade, e depois eu tenho algumas que o pessoal nos enviou a partir de outros canais, como do YouTube.
Okay, so I see, okay, so I go to the chat. Let's start from the beginning. So what happens if we have water in the formulation? Will the DEOHAP be saturated and won't be able to absorb the sweat? So very smart and intelligent question. So the reply is basically inside the question. So basically, what happens when we will formulate DEOHAP Dry inside a water-based formulation? DEOHAP Dry will be able to draw water molecules. So in that moment, it will be saturated. But what happens when we are applying the emulsion on the armpit? What will happen is that the water contained in DEOHAP and in the formulation will evaporate. So the saturation level of DEOHAP Dry in that moment will be over, because DEOHAP Dry will interact also with the external environment. So basically, it will be a constant exchange of water from the formulation to DEOHAP to the external environment, from the sweat to DEOHAP and to the external environment. So it is a process that self-regenerates itself throughout the time through the interface of the external environment. So I hope this replies to the question. So next question is, as DEOHAP Dry is a natural mineral, could it contain any aluminum percentage? If we analyzed its aluminum content, will we find any amount? Okay, so the biomimétic hydroxyapatite does not contain any aluminum in its composition because its structure is very well defined. So basically, as we have seen in the initial slides, basically the compound that is active in DEOHAP Dry is called basically calcium, zinc, magnesium hydroxyapatite. So the hydroxyapatite molecule definitely does not contain any mineral in its composition. Next question is, could you please share the formulation you have used for the in vivo gravimetric test? Well, it is in the marketing presentation I showed before. It's the first roll-on formulation. So it's the formula where basically we are using 20% of DEOHAP Dry. So once we will share the formulation, you will definitely find it there. I see a question in Portuguese. I guess it's a question of sending the presentation later. Okay. Next question, how can I classify the product under US law? bearing in mind that according to what I understood, it is a local issue due to absorption and not due to gland blockage. Just as a deodorant, will it be an OTC? Okay, so basically, what I have shown before, this is very important point, is an FDA, is a test according to the FDA standards, where we don't want to say that our product should be claimed as an antiperspirant. What we want, our aim is to show that, I mean, we are able to match and overcome the minimum functional requirement that antiperspirants have. So basically, DEOHAP Dry should not be claimed as an antiperspirant because it is basically a deodorizing product. So from a theoretical and practical point of view, the most ethical and correct approach is calling a product containing DEOHAP as a deodorant or as a sweat control active. On the other side, we are complying with the functional parameter of antiperspirants. So the let's say the connection with antiperspirants is just theoretical. Then, of course, I mean, if we are working with the OTC, an OTC, I'm not very familiar with the this regulation because in Europe the approach is totally different. But I guess that you should claim the active ingredients in an OTC. So at that point, you cannot claim the DEOHAP Dry as an active ingredient inside an OTC because it is not monographed at the moment. So for this reason, I would say that if you want to make an OTC with DEOHAP Dry, you can do it, but you cannot claim it as an active ingredient. If by any chance my replies are not clear, feel free to ask again if you still have doubts. Other question: was DEOHAP Dry compared with sodium bicarbonate in vitro and or in vivo? No, I don't have a reply for that because sodium bicarbonate was not used in our evaluations. We have for the in vivo test, basically, we didn't need really a comparison because the most important point there is the threshold of sweat reduction. So basically, our parameter there is accomplishing at least 20%, which almost no active on the market is able to work on. Instead, in the in vitro test, we have more focused the attention on the zeolite and magnesium ions, which are very popular on the market today. For example, if you take a look to most of the new launches coming mainly also from multinationals, today there is a huge trend of use of magnesium ions, where the absorbing and deodorizing action is ascribed to the magnesium compounds. So that's why we have focused the attention of our comparison more in the direction of magnesium derivatives rather than sodium bicarbonate. Of course, we will share the presentation again. For the price reference, of course, Color Mix will take care of that. Okay, so other question? Sorry.
No. Prossiga, por favor.
Okay. So another question is it possible that it stains the clothes in the armpit area? Theoretically, that's totally the opposite. I mean, this product is aimed to avoid this kind of stains formation. So especially at the concentration of use that we are recommending, the amount of mineral is not that relevant to determining the formation of stains. Another question, can the product be used by children? Of course, yes. What Calichem does, the first thought we have in mind when developing products is thinking to the new generations. So definitely DEOHAP Dry was developed with the aim of being as gentlest and mildest as possible. So from this point of view, we are definitely positioning this raw material also for baby care applications. Can this product be used in intimate areas? Wow, good idea. We have not really experienced this application, but of course, this product works very effectively in absorbing water. So, for example, it can definitely it can be used. We have not tried it from a potential point of view. It is totally feasible. Another question is whether the product can be used in food odor products. Absolutely, absolutely, yes. As a matter of fact, this is one of the applications for which DEOHAP Dry is currently already used on the market for food odor and also for food hyperhidrosis. So the reply is definitely yes. On the presentation, I said that we can use DEOHAP Dry in aerosol deodorant, but I would know why we can't use in this packaging. Okay, so maybe I did not. It was not clear the point. I did not explain well the difference. So DEOHAP Dry in a suspension version cannot be used in an aerosol formulation, but DEOHAP Dry powder definitely can. Because usually aerosol formulation do not bear the addition of water, or at least, I mean, there could be some water, but in very small amounts. If we want to take advantage of the functional concentration of DEOHAP Dry, of course, we should consider a use of approximately 20% of suspension. So the amount of water with 20% in an aerosol formulation would be a little bit too much. So I would consider for the aerosol the powder formulation. So we are not closing the door on aerosols. We are just mentioning that we need to work with the powder version. The powder version, this is important, is optimized for sticks and aerosol formulations. If we are working in presence of water, we definitely recommend to work with the water suspension version. Any incompatibilities of DEOHAP Dry? Based on our knowledge, there is no incompatibility. The DEOHAP Dry is a mineral that basically is inert. So at the end of the day, what we observe is that the product simply tends to draw molecules of water or odors, but it does not release its active components. So based on our experience, at least, we do not have any experience of incompatibility in formula. So another question, aerosol bag-on valve. Will I use the emulsion? I'm not sure I understood the question. I will try to reiterate the previous concept. So if we are using sprayable formulation where water can be included, we can definitely work also with the DEOHAP Dry suspension version. If the product will come with butane, so I mean in pressurized packaging, in that case, definitely we must not work with the water-based version, but just with the powder. The powder, DEOHAP Dry powder is absolutely not volatile. So the other question was whether the powder version of DEOHAP Dry is volatile and could enter in the respiratory tract. Absolutely no. Hydroxyapatite is not volatile. So it is a product that definitely keeps its physical chemical nature. If hydroxyapatite would be volatile, all of a sudden we would lose our teeth, which luckily does not happen.
Ok. Temos uma questão, tivemos várias questões, mas que são muito próximas das que foram feitas aqui, mas uma é diferente, perguntando que benefício, né, além da ação de eliminação do suor, da sudorese e dos maus odores, Que benefício a gente pode encontrar no uso do DEOHAP para a pele?
Definitely. So usually these claims are not very popular in deodorants, so that's why I did not mention them specifically. But at the end of the day, I mentioned that we have a product based on hydroxyapatite. Hydroxyapatite is a mineral that, for example, is used in aesthetic medicine in injections, because it is able to increase the skin compactness because of the content of calcium and phosphates. So basically, it is a mineral that also has some nourishing action on the skin. So in general, the most important activity of hydroxyapatite known in literature is the increase of skin compactness, which at the end of the day is a very interesting claim now that I think about it, because if you consider, for example, the use of aluminum salts, what you're doing is the opposite. So you are irritating the skin, you are compromising the regular perspiration, you are promoting the destruction of the local microbiota. Whereas with hydroxyapatite, we are nourishing, we are feeding the skin. So definitely we can claim an increase of the compactness and a keeping of the homeostasis of the skin barrier function. I see that another question has arrived. So no butane or propane, just air. Okay, I have to check with the development team because I have not experience of this particular application and its potential compatibility with DEOHAP Dry. We will for sure go through this point, and we will revert back through color mix.
Ok, Google. Acho que encerramos, né? A gente deixa aberto para quem tiver mais dúvidas, pode entrar em contato conosco. Vou dar um spoilerzinho aqui, nós estamos desenvolvendo, né, em conjunto com o pessoal da Calichem, uma formulação bem apropriada aqui para o clima do Brasil, para a pele do brasileiro, e vamos testá-la, vamos fazer todos os testes, né, de eficácia, de controle de sudorese, da ação bacteriostática, enfim, desodorante do produto, e posso dizer que em breve ela estará disponível para todo mundo que quiser conhecê-la, vai ser na forma de um roll-on, que o Brasil tem um mercado bastante grande para essa forma de aplicação. É uma formulação toda verde, para quem estiver procurando, né, soluções sustentáveis e enfim, alinhadas aí com esse conceito de beleza limpa. Pode nos contatar. O nosso site da Colormix, né, é www.colormix.net.br. Se alguém precisar de alguma informação técnica, eu deixei meu e-mail aqui no chat para a gente enviar a programação, a apresentação para vocês. E é isso, é um prazer muito grande, né? Sempre estar aqui na companhia de clientes, amigos, fornecedores, né, ricos como é a Calichem. Para a Colormix é muito gratificante essa parceria. E nos despedimos. Para informar o e-mail de novo, por favor. Então vamos lá. É meu nome, eu vou escrever aqui, ó, eliane.dornelas@colormix.net.br. Tá aqui, para quem quiser, pode chamar que a gente responde, né? E agradecer a todos, agradecer a todo o pessoal da ABC, agradecer a Cida, nossa querida tradutora, a todos vocês que estiveram aqui com a gente, agradecer muito ao Guglielmo e toda a equipe lá da Calichem, e toda a equipe da Colormix também, que, né, sem isso a gente não poderia estar aqui.
Thank you.
Fica você, Guglielmo, com as últimas despedidas aí.
Thank you very much for your time, attention, and patience. I hope this presentation was useful and that will give some new ideas for future developments. In any case, CARICHEM is open to offer its technical support and reply to any doubt at any time. So thanks again, Color Mix. Thanks again, ABC. And thanks again, everybody, for attending this event.